Great. So here I am at the world headquarters of GitHub in San Francisco. I'm here with Zach Holman, GitHub developer whose blog I found pretty interesting. And in particular, one of the things that I wanted to talk to him about was this idea that at GitHub, instead of having formal design and code reviews where you kind of put a bunch of people in a room, the pull request, when somebody's trying to get code pushed into the master repo, serves the role that a code review serves in other places. So is that, I mean, do you guys really do that? Why does that even work?
Pull requests are a good way of just making sure everyone's on the same page, even if you don't happen to be in the same room with each other. And it's just a nice way of not making sure that you're pulling somebody away from their own work that they're trying to work on and get stuff done. And you can do it sort of as you see fit. In all of our pull requests, we'll say like, hey, Tom, do you want to come in and check this out? And that's a nice way of saying, Tom, check this out. And it's a lot easier than going into some room and trying to get everyone focused on the same page, taking time out of their day to do all this sort of stuff.
Now, from what you told me before, at least the way that you guys do things now, initially everybody in the company sees the pull request.
Yeah.
And you're sort of leaving it up to their judgment whether they really need to become part of the discussion, or if it's a piece of code that they don't have anything to do with, maybe it's safe for them to just ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like instead of sort of trusting that anybody can check in code and arbitrarily do a push, there is still a level of trust here, right? It has to do with maybe you're going to sanity check other people's code. It's up to you to decide if you need to be part of that conversation. So does that, what is it about the GitHub culture that makes that work?
We want people to have faith that what they're putting out as their code is good and solid and ready to go. That sort of goes hand in hand with we let people deploy all the time whenever they want.
So anybody can theoretically push the button that deploys new code to production.
Your first day in GitHub, even if you're a designer who's not skilled in Ruby or whatever, you can deploy the entire site to all of our servers.
So you trust people.
Yeah, and we don't have people go willy-nilly doing that because we trust people to say, okay, I'm not ready for this code to just go out to all these different people. So we want people to make sure that what they're going to do is that they're responsible for it. That goes hand in hand with pull request of saying, if you're not necessarily comfortable with just deploying all your stuff right away, you make sure that the right people can see it, that the right people can say, yeah, that's good, or no, that's not good, fix this part. So it's sort of your responsibility to make sure that people check off, that you talk to the right people to check off your work, and it's also your responsibility to make sure that you check off somebody else that may be working in a realm that you can sort of help out with.
So there's kind of a cultural expectation here about code quality and recognizing your responsibility as far as ensuring the quality of your own code. Is there, I think among the people that I've talked to in this informal series, you're one of the younger ones. You've been out of school for the least amount of time. How many years for the record?
Almost 4.
Almost 4. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel so old. But I think that's valuable because you probably remember going through your undergraduate career. And, in retrospect, are there things that undergrads in CS could and should do that would prepare them to sort of participate in this culture? With course projects, it's kind of hard. They could be small in scope or sort of artificial.
Yeah, I mean, school tends to teach you really well the abstract and like the theory and stuff. And as much as possible, that's fantastic, obviously. But try to do stuff that actually matters, like very concrete. Matters is a strong word, I apologize.
That's cool.
Do stuff that's actually concrete and impacts somebody else in real life. That, if you deploy this piece of code to somebody, they're actually going to feel pain if you screw up. And by that I mean if it means volunteering for a nonprofit or building something for them, or I had a small website had going the entire time through my schooling. That let me sort of play around with stuff and actually see people's expectations to make sure that what I was building, could impact them. And it makes you think things a lot differently. It's not just like an abstract textbook example anymore. It's
So basically, you think students ought to try to get an opportunity to build something or contribute to something where somebody besides them will care.
Yes.
If something goes wrong.
For sure. Because no matter what, people are harder to build for than yourself.
I bet they are. Is there, in terms of contributing to open source, is this Is there an opportunity around open source to do something like this? Because, hey, theoretically anybody can contribute to that, right?
Yeah, I wish I did more open source, or I guess any open source when I was in school. Because open source is like the best realm of, one, it's free. You don't have to like try and get a job to do it, which is great. Two, it's just so accessible. And I think especially like the first time, I spent the longest time trying to think of like, oh man, I should try and contribute to open source and stuff. And it's a very big mental hurdle to say that like, I am good enough to do this. And you really are, because it's not hard to contribute to an open source project. You just sort of figure out where you can pitch in and improve the stuff. And the coolest part of that is that open source is so visible. When you commit to something, somebody will probably come around and say, hey, you're doing this really wrong. And it's times like that when somebody says like, you're so wrong, and let me tell you why. A, B, C, and D. You're so wrong. Those are the times that stick out in my mind where I'm like, okay, God, I feel terrible, and now I will never ever forget this. And that is the most growing that I've ever done in terms of like learning any sort of language or technology, is to find someone to say, no, you're doing it wrong, here's how you fix it. And open source is just a great way to do that, especially if you're sending in a pull request to somebody saying like, here, accept my code. Those guys are in a position to say, I really want my project to do really well. And if you screw something up in the code, they're going to say no, and they're going to tell you why. And that's just a great way to sort of get feedback on
So
that.
at the risk of overly paraphrasing you, trying to pull these two threads together, I would say as an undergrad, one of the best things you can do to prepare for this kind of career is find opportunities for screwing up.
Oh, yeah.
Find opportunities where you can make a mistake that actually matters to someone else, because that's actually where you get a lot of your learning, is from learning from your mistakes.
Yeah. And if you're just making mistakes for yourself, like, you don't really learn from that. You have to sort of upset somebody else, and then you sort of realize, oh, this is impacting somebody else.
So the good news, for the students and other people watching the screencast is, if your customer is mad at you, look at the bright side. You're going to learn something from it.
Totally.
Well, thanks very much. This has been great. I appreciate it. This has been Zach Holman here at GitHub, and you're watching SaaS TV.